What's up, everybody? Kevin Johnston here, host of the Sock Takes Pod. Been a while, but we are back here for episode 64 and got a great guest for you today. Good friend of mine, one of the most fantastic people you'll find here in the Indiana soccer community, and more specifically, I guess, in the futsal community. It's my good buddy, Justin Becht, the director of Indiana Futsal. How's it going, buddy?
Going good. Going good. We're laying low right now, but we've got some big projects in the works, and we think we're going to come back in 2021 with some exciting new things. And the soccer world has smiled upon me today, so I'm feeling good about things.
And our listeners, if you're not familiar with Indiana soccer, it is a branch of Indiana futsal. It is a branch of Indiana soccer, the, I guess, quote unquote, official governing body kind of the state of Indiana. And I guess your title kind of doubles as Indiana soccer director of futsal. Got a couple titles going on there. But anyway, it's good to have you, buddy. Good to see you doing well. And I'm sure this should be a fun conversation. I'm not sure how long we'll go. Maybe, knowing us, we'll probably ramble on for at least 30 minutes, but we'll try to keep it to with an hour. But
anyway, I don't have anywhere to go. I'm a fan of the show. I'm glad to be here. I can't wait to send this to some of my friends that listen to you and Sock Takes. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. Awesome. And a cool way that we kind of connected too is you're a patron of ours. And I forget where we were. Was it like our 1-year anniversary, or we hit some metric, maybe our 50th, but we decided to release a patron-only podcast and go a full 90, we call it. So we did a 90-minute pod that was just a grab bag, kind of off the walls, very unprofessional, have a couple drinks and just ramble on for our patrons. And it probably got a total of 2 or 3 listens, I would say. One of them happened to be you. I found out we met at, I think we bumped into each other at Flat 12, which is now defunct. But shout out to Flat 12 Brewery. Yeah, what's it called now?
Flat 12.
Oh, Flat 12 is still there? I thought it changed the name.
Still there. I think they're under new ownership. But
oh, word.
They're there.
Word. Okay, cool. Well, anyway, so I randomly bumped into Justin, and we kind of just became real close friends from there. In fact, Sock Takes, we decided to become an official partner of Indiana Futsal because back to the podcast I was talking about that 3 people listened to. Well, apparently Justin was one of them because he mentioned it at Flat 12. He also mentioned that he noticed that we were looking for a nonprofit to partner up with. This was at the end of year 1 of Sock Takes, heading into year 2, back when we were ambitious and wide-eyed. And so you floated me a couple ideas, if I remember this correctly. One of which was like, well, how about us, Indiana Futsal, but I don't want to, so how about, X, Y, and Z? And I was like, well, how about just Indiana Futsal? And so you were like, yeah. And so it just kind of fell into place perfectly. But yeah, anyway, it's been great getting to know you. Great partnering with you. And you guys do great things at Indiana Futsal. Really appreciate what you guys do. So without further ado, we got to get started with your favorite club, Fulham. This guy's a big Fulham supporter. And we're recording this on a Monday, fresh off. Oh, nice. Love it. Love it. Fresh off Fulham's first victory in the Premier League this season, a 2-0 win at West Brom. I guess West Brom, I think you could cure homelessness, even if a homeless person just played a game of FIFA against West Brom with any team, what better way to get off a schneid than West Brom? That's what West Brom is meant to be around the world.
They're pretty bad. They're bad. We feel good about ourselves. We'll take 3 points wherever we can get it. But they really didn't have any business coming up in the first place.
Yeah, it's super crazy what's going on in the Premier League right now. I noticed that even after today's result, there are, I believe, 5 teams at the bottom of the table that all have 1 or 0 wins right now. So it seemed like, Fulham, they look like the worst of the worst, and all it took was 1 dub, and you're technically right now out of the relegation zone. So that's how dire things are at the bottom of the table right now.
We're only a couple games behind Manchester United. I don't know what you're talking about.
So anyway, I did not get to catch you. You're only 2 spots behind Man U. I saw that. You guys are in 4th or 5th to last, and then they're in 6th or 7th to last. So.
Right where we need to be.
Great. So yeah, I didn't get to check out any of the game today, unfortunately. Saw the result, obviously. So what exactly went on in the game today? How was Fulham able to achieve this first dub of the season?
Well, we started off well, as we usually do. We get off to a good start. We move the ball around. We start to assert our dominance and start looking like a team that doesn't belong in the bottom five. And then usually around the 30-minute mark, things go south. But we started playing a new center back, Anderson, that we just bought from Porto. And he came in and was an absolute rock. Tim Ream is a legend. He has been a servant to the club. He has performed beyond everyone's expectations. But today was the first day that he was on the bench. And I would say the step up quality in the back really helped us solidify and play higher up the field. That and a game from my favorite player, who I think is very underappreciated, Tom Kearney. He was just running things all over the field and pulling the strings. So it was a good time. Got to go down to Chatham Tap at Mass Ave, catch the game midday. Not something I would usually do, but today was a good opportunity.
Nice. And as not much of a Fulham fan at all, and only watching them sporadically, one player from the second I saw you guys got him, I was kind of excited when you got Mitrovic. I've always been a huge fan of him, and it's kind of weird because it like, I don't know, I thought he seemed like his goal scoring rate or whatever, his productivity had kind of been a quote unquote disappointment slightly at the Premier League level, of course. But I didn't want to make a fool of myself. So I kind of I crunched the numbers a little bit on kind of his tenure at Fulham, if you will. And it kind of just looks like he's sort of streaky. I mean, even when he struggles, he's still not bad. Like if you look at his overall numbers, and I want to say that in the 2018-19 season, his first year in the PL with Fulham, I think he scored like 5 goals in like the first 6 games, something like that. And then after that, he only scored 5 or 6 more the rest of the way, you know? So he got like 5 goals early, and then the final 30-ish games only got like 5 or 6 more. So all in all, he had, the double-digit scoring season in the Premier League. That's obviously not shabby whatsoever. But at the same time, I just feel like you're going to pay the amount of money and resources invested to get him. It just seems like, I don't know if it's similar to like a Josie Altidore situation when he was in the Premier League. Obviously, he's not quite as good of a player as Mitrovic, if you look at full body of work or actual talent level. But Mitrovic, he always, for Serbia, he's like a destroyer. And in fact, like if you look at his goals per cap, he scores like over 50% of his appearances he scores for the national team. And in fact, in the championship for 2019-20, Fulham's promotion season in the championship, he had a similar rate too, scored at a rate greater than every other game. So like I said, he hasn't been a disappointment. That's not a fair word, but I still don't think Fulham has kind of quite unlocked his full potential. So is it a matter of just finding wingers that can give him service? Is it a matter of completely changing the tactical style to kind of make him a focal point up top, playing his feet? What do you think is the game plan to kind of unlock his full potential?
So Mitrovic is a classic number 9. He's a bruiser. I mean, he's a power forward. He's a player you dump it into, he's going to hold it up. And that kind of player is dying off in the modern game. The modern game's about speed, about catching teams on the break. There are not many players like Mitrovic around anymore. And not just the role he plays physically, but his mentality. He's kind of like an early 90s basketball player. He is rough around the edges. He's getting cards every other game. He's not a friend of the referees. He's in the ear of every center back he's on. He's a different breed of player. And so Parker tried something over the past, I'd say 6 or 7 games. If you look at the stats, Fulham's dumping in about 10 more crosses than any other team in the Premier League per game. And they think just creating chances out of crosses is going to be enough just by volume to score the goals to get them up. And what they've done is they've relied too much on Mitrovic, and you cannot win with those tactics in the Premier League. It's not the same as the Championship. And I think Parker is wise to realize that those tactics won't keep you up either. And I think that he's realized that he's got to play players like Bobby Deckerdorf, Reed, and Andre Lookman, have to play closer to Mitrovic and play off of him, which you saw today with Mitrovic having 2 assists. Mitrovic has to change his game as well. He thinks he's going to score 2 goals every time he hits the field, and sometimes he's got to be a little less selfish and combine with players as well. The other problem that has contributed to that is the past year and a half, Fulham went with inverted wieners, Anthony Knocker, Ivan Cavallero, they played wide, but they didn't get balls into the box. And every team in the championship has a 6'5" goon just waiting on players like Mitrovic. So all of those factors combined to it. I think Mitrovic is a great player. I think for Serbia, he gets to play with a little more freedom and in a different way than he gets to play in the Premier League. But I think it just goes to the point that Mitrovic is a dying breed of a player, and Fulham is trying to adapt their way of play around a classic number 9, which you don't see as often. But you got to give it up to Ibrahimovic. The guy's almost 40 years old playing classic number 9. He scores every game. He's brilliant.
Zlatan, yeah, he's kind of a freak of nature, the ageless wonder.
I don't know if Andy Carroll ever had a run of games or half the goals that Mitrovic has, but man, people spend a lot of money for Andy Carroll.
All right, well, let's touch on some Indiana futsal topics. Of course, you guys do great work. You partner with a lot of local civic parks and schools and whatnot, and you basically build these people courts for free with grant money and your fundraising money. So I guess before we jump into kind of some of the new projects and some of the projects you've completed recently, you had a chance to do something very rare, something very special. Got to travel outside of the United States to a place that, despite how close it is, few have traveled to. And only kind of in the last several years have a lot of people even been able to go there. So why don't you tell us a little about your trips to Cuba?
Yeah, this is something we're really excited about. We were gifted an opportunity. Friend of the show, Guijo Gordon, here in Indianapolis, as well as Anton Burry, who lives in Iowa. They had connected through an organization called Arte Corte, which is a nonprofit in Cuba that works to train people. It's like job training. So whether it's working at a bar, running a store, working in a restaurant, it's a program to get young people new skills to work into the booming tourism industry, but also local tourism, not just Americans going to Cuba, right? So Arte Corte is really sits at the hub of Old Havana and connects people in many different ways and through many different networks. And we were lucky enough to be put in touch with Anton, who had worked to put together a futsal tournament in Havana. And we got to partner to go. This was 2 years ago. We went for 10 days in May to essentially host a futsal tournament and try to host the biggest futsal tournament that's ever been hosted in Cuba, and without any prior planning. So we had 10 days to hit the ground and organize that community, spread the word, get referees, get nets on the goals, clean up this area we were using for the court, and make the tournament happen. And it rained the first 8 days. And it kept pushing the tournament back and kept pushing the tournament back. And we were just terrified that, all the support we got from people back home, all the support we got from the soccer community, that we'd hope it wouldn't be all for nothing if this tournament completely got rained out. But we got the opportunity to negotiate with the Cuban government to use the national stadium, Kid Chocolate, to host one of the last futsal tournaments ever hosted in that facility. And we hosted, I believe it was 12 teams over 2 days, with a women's division as well. And we had a big trophy, we had the drone shots, we had a crazy video, and a lot of great stories came out of that tournament. But it was just really cool to see how futsal can mobilize the community and serve a community in different ways, not just through competition, but through collaborating with different partners and different intersections that the game occupies. And in Cuba, you know, baseball has been the top sport for so long that soccer is seen kind of counterculture. It seems like it's young people are mostly into soccer and futsal, and that seems to be a threat to baseball. We noticed this with skateboarding as well. And we like this anywhere we went and saw futsal courts and futsal being played, there was always skateboarding. And so we love the intersection of the arts, the skateboarding, the university we went to where people are playing. We love seeing futsal being promoted purely on that grassroots level and not from the top down from a federation. And that's something that we took a lot from, and we really learned a lot about in our first trip down there. And then we were lucky enough for a second trip where we hosted a community futsal tournament at another site. And again, we're really keeping the ball rolling on this program and trying to support them to grow futsal across the, not just across Havana, but across the island. And not to be too long-winded, but I can't go on without talking about the partner on the ground, Edgar, who works in Havana. He's a math teacher, and he recognized the need in his community for kids to need something to do after school, and maybe didn't have the access to the baseball team or other sports, but there's a park, there's a street, you can kick a ball around. And so Edgar started organizing play for younger kids, but they had to do their homework. They had to be clean. They had to, you know, they had to respect the referees. Everybody had to have a set. There's already a set culture that Edgar set for his program to grow and be inclusive to everybody. So now, as I just talked to Edgar today, he grew this team from, I think, 3 years ago. He now has, he hosted the Futsal World Cup on a few of the courts that we were at and that we painted. He had 48 teams, and with both men and women. And so and 48 teams in Havana, that's a lot. That's a lot of people playing futsal. And so the other goal of this is right now Cuba does not, they have a men's national futsal team, but they do not have a women's national futsal team. So we're trying to push for INDER, the Cuban sports organization, to create and support a women's national futsal team in Cuba.
Oh, wow. That'd be awesome. So the first trip, you didn't do any painting or court building. It was just kind of planning and running a tournament. Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
And then the second trip was when, did you build a court from scratch, or did you find like a good lot and just paint? What exactly did you do as far as like court building in the second trip?
There's one existing futsal court near the university, but you could barely see the lines. The arches were gone. There wasn't much paint. So what we did was completely repaint the surface and repaint the goals, put new nets on, have a logo at midcourt, and really, you know, make it a new futsal court. And then at a park in the Acapulco neighborhood, there's already an existing league, but they play on a court that's more like a 4v4 court. It's not a full futsal court. So Anton and Mitch, the partners, the great guys from Iowa, they helped secure some paint before we got down, and they helped and they led the way on painting the court there with some really great artists doing some really cool things on the court. And that's something else I want to take back to Indiana is when we build futsal courts, I really want to work with more artists, and I really want to see more creativity put into those spaces.
Cool. And before we wrap up the Cuba discussion, I remember you said that everywhere you went, there were two things: soccer and hip hop. So as a big hip hop head myself, I found that quite fascinating. And I was like, man, I might need to move there. Those are the only two things I like too. So, But
Congrats.
anyway, I'm kind of curious to know, first of all, just in general, kind of what that was like. And also, I remember it's been several years, probably at least 5 or 6 years ago, that I want to say it was like a report on Vice or an outlet like that. And it was kind of how, because of lack of infrastructure and internet not readily available everywhere, it was hard for Cubans to kind of get their hands on American culture, like American art, music, whatnot. And I remember according to their support, the most common method was what they called a paquete, which was just a packet of content, essentially, on disk or whatever, on a zip drive. And it just had a bunch of songs, American songs that they could not get. So I'm curious, has the infrastructure and like internet improved to the point where that's no longer a thing? Are they going on YouTube and listening to American hip hop, or is it still kind of an underground thing that it's hard to come by? What exactly is the hip hop culture in Cuba like?
I maybe not necessarily YouTube, but yes, internet is becoming much more accessible, at least in Havana. We didn't travel much outside of Havana, so I can't speak on that. But I think what you're saying is true. And I think, look, me and you, I think we'd still be getting floppy disks of music or flash drives or, but yeah, I think the younger people are streaming music and listening to Bad Bunny 24/7.
Awesome. So real quick, before I ask you about new projects, could you rattle off just as many courts that you can think of off the top of your head that you have built in the state of Indiana or otherwise?
Sure, we'll try to go in order. The first one was at Rhodius Park, which is on the southwest side of downtown Indianapolis, next to William Penn Elementary. That project is forever one of the closest, or one of I think, the greatest accomplishments of Indiana futsal, because that was the first public space for futsal that anyone could come and there is a futsal court for you. And that really set the precedent and got the dominoes falling for the other courts. The second one is actually on the Pleasant Run Trail. There are not permanent goals, so you may not see it from the street, but if you walk out there, there's a play mural and there are futsal lines. This is just south of the Fountain Square area in Indianapolis. The third one is at Arsenal Tech High School. That was a partnership between U.S. Soccer Foundation, Indy 11, Kroger, and that was a effort to create a space to play for the students at Arsenal Tech, at Harshman Junior High, Potter Elementary, and also open to the public. And so you see a lot of downtown Broad Ripple people playing there on a Sunday afternoon. We are currently resurfacing that, and it's going to come back better than ever. And a shout out to the 18, the muralists who were responsible for the Black Lives Matter mural downtown on Indiana Avenue. Nate, Billy, Ashley, all helping us with the logos, giving us a nice artistic spin instead of just some cookie cutter stencils. We got an Indiana futsal logo with a Chuck Taylor in it. So I'm looking forward to opening that court back up. Real quick, so Connorsville, Indiana, we just opened up, is our newest one, way out in eastern Indiana. Rushville, which is southeastern Indiana, not too far from Connorsville. And Lasse Academy on the west side on West 38th Street is an elementary school. And CFI 2 downtown, just off of Mass Ave. We've got a few coming up in the spring. We're just a few steps away from, I think, sealing the deal on Vigo County, which is Terre Haute. Hopefully one in Columbus. And really excited about some big things going on up in Elkhart, Goshen, Indiana. So our goal is to have as many public futsal courts as any state. I don't know if we're going to get to 100 like New York, but I'm proud that we have more than Chicago.
And not just Indiana futsal, but Indiana soccer as an organization as a whole. How has COVID-19 impacted you guys?
I think we're starting to get a grasp on how it's affected us statewide, and certainly it's affected Indiana soccer in some areas more than others. I think our members have been as diligent as possible about being safe and returning to play. I think they're doing a good job of distancing on the sidelines. Coaches are wearing masks. The parents are mostly being supportive of wearing masks on the sidelines and maybe not getting so close at practice. So yes, participation's been down, but honestly, it hasn't been as detrimental as we thought it might be. And again, this is largely due to most of Indiana Soccer's membership are rec level clubs throughout the state. People have the perception that, U.S. soccer, travel soccer, all the registered members are suburban travel teams. That's not really the case. And so most of our membership, at least at the U12 level and under, we're able to have some sort of play this fall. But again, then in my world, in Indiana, in futsal, playing indoors in the winter, your facility probably doesn't have the best ventilation. And then we're talking about adults. I don't think we're in a space where we're ready to sanction indoor play for this winter. So it's definitely going to hurt the futsal world, but we'll adapt like we always do.
Awesome. And in case you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen over the last maybe year or 2 years, I have kind of tried to dip my toes into the coaching waters. And Justin has been a huge help along the way, actually. I remember when I was taking some of the official U.S. soccer courses, shout out to Steve Franklin and George Perry, who were actually running the exact classes I was in. And I remember in one of the classes, there was a space, you had to list like your instructor, and then there was a space for mentor, but like, so I put like Steve for the instructor, but I was like mentor. I thought that just meant like, who was the assistant? Like what? So I put like George, and then someone else like asked about it. Like, what's this mentor space? And you actually were supposed to put someone else who you're soccer. And it's like, well, cause I'd never coached before, I don't have a mentor, but I was like, well, I'm going to put Justin Becht down here because he's kind of put me up to this. He's got the wheels spinning in my head. He's given me opportunities to, gave me a great opportunity to coach some youths here in Indy on the near east side. Right there at O'Bannon Park. Got the chance to coach like some 6 and 7 year olds, which was a blast. Tons of good times there. So anyway, of course, thank you for all you've done for me along the way. I still, I just have one more course to take. Then I'm ready to take the D license if I decide to go down that route. But I need a little more experience before I devote all my time and money to the D license. But that's kind of a goal that I may try to achieve. We'll see. But anyway, George Perry just recently won a very distinguished award. What exactly did he win, and what does that mean to Indiana soccer as a whole?
So George won the 2020 Honor Award from United Soccer Coaches. United Soccer Coaches being the governing body for and the central organization for all soccer coaches here in the U.S. And this is another and a long list of lifetime achievements for George. And he just continues to build on a legacy of being not only a steward of the game, but a servant to the game here in Indiana. We give him crap all the time for winning all these awards, but he really is deserving. And I think a lot of people in our Indiana soccer community realize that George he's a real one. He's a true servant to the community out here, and we're blessed to have him.
And if you haven't seen the documentary Worth the Wait, definitely go check that out. It was on the Big Ten Network, so I don't know where it's streamable, but anyway, you got to find it. George was one of the interview subjects, having played at IU, also was an assistant coach at IU, and also another random crossing of paths with Sock Takes is one of our contributors, Catherine Knapp, who lives up in Northern Indiana, does a great job covering the game. She also was an interview subject in there. So anyway, it's crazy how often our paths cross in the soccer community. But yeah, shout out to George. Congrats to him on the award. In fact, I'd love to get Steve and George together on the pod sometime. Or maybe one of those guys and you or something along those lines. We'll have to do like a follow-up.
No,
I
you
know
don't.
Steve's a character. He's an absolute character.
Just one of us at a time.
Yeah, Steve might need like 4 episodes by himself. He's such a character. You and George are a little more grounded down there, but yeah, Steve, he's on one, as they say at all times,
Steve is on one. Yeah.
in a good
You know,
way.
let me brag on Steve real quick too, because he's really helping champion an effort at Indiana soccer. Um, so the UN, the United Nations, has a Sports for Peace initiative. They're trying to support programs that are using sports to build peace wherever they are, whatever communities they are. And so this idea kind of sprung out of the Cuba project with a friend of mine, Frankie Kesey, who worked at Peace Learning Center. She was a vital part of that Cuba project, teaching and leading courses with conflict management and resolution and different kind of trainings. And so Frankie and I had this vision for how do we use soccer for peace, not only abroad, but especially in our communities in Indiana that maybe don't get the grant money, that don't get the focus that, you know, because a lot of soccer organizations are chasing these goals abroad, but they're not doing it in their own backyard. And so what Frankie and I got talking about it, and we found out that Steve Franklin, the director of education at Indiana Soccer, has been working with Ball State and Lindsey Blum, who's the director of the sports psychology department there, on doing sports for peace studies and programs in Tajikistan, Jordan, India, and I know I'm forgetting another one. So learning that over the past year, Frankie and I have been meeting with Steve and Lindsay, and we're talking about creating a coaching cohort here in Indiana that we can address some of these issues that can connect communities that maybe aren't coaching license or referee license, or maybe it's not X's and O's on the field, but how can you find a way to have a collective impact through soccer in your own community and utilize other coaches and other resources that maybe aren't a community like yours. I'll use Connorsville and Rushville, for example. These are small towns in Eastern Indiana. I'm from that area. If we can connect coaches and like-minded people in those communities to work with each other and grow their programs, that's going to be more beneficial than it being mandated and handed down by U.S. Soccer, right? So we're trying to take a more bottom-up approach to connecting our members and supporting them where they are. And Steve's been instrumental on bringing great ideas and leadership to that effort.
Awesome. And I just realized I kind of left a cliffhanger there when I mentioned the documentary Worth the Wait. Just add a little more context to that before I trailed off there. It's a documentary about Indiana University soccer program, which you might know as a powerhouse in the collegiate ranks, but it wasn't always the powerhouse it is now. In fact, they kind of the premise of the movie was they kind of started out as the Buffalo Bills. So I'm not going to give too many details about what goes on in the documentary, but the backstory is that Indiana actually lost 3 times in the championship game to San Francisco. 3 times before they ever got their first title. So total Buffalo Bills style. And then obviously that's where the documentary kind of gets its title, Worth the Wait, because you probably can guess what happened after that. So it's a very inspirational story, fantastic documentary, very well done, very well produced. But yeah, definitely check that out because there's quite a few people featured in it in our Indiana soccer community here. So definitely check out Worth the Wait if you have not seen that on the Big Ten Network. So Justin, before I let you go, we of course have to touch on the Indy 11. How could we go a pod without touching on the 11? So it was a bit of a rough finish to the season. I think before the show, you said you didn't have too many talking points, so I'll probably ramble on for a while, but I'll kick it over to you. What do you think kind of went wrong there down the stretch for the 11? Things are going so well, and then the wheels kind of fell off. What happened there?
Yeah, I think we got a little stale there at the end. I think we got figured out. Just my own opinion from my 2 eyes up in the BYB. I think we got a little predictable, and we needed to be a little braver and play some more of our dynamic, more creative players more early and often. But you know, when you're playing 3 games in 8 days. You know, sometimes like they were playing at least 2 games a week there for a while, you're playing the cards you were dealt. And Martin really was, along with every other coach in the league, is trying to balance his depth through his roster. But injuries and just playing so many games in such a short time frame, it's hard to. It just didn't seem like we could really fire the engine back up late in the season and find that extra spark. And unfortunately, we missed out on the playoffs. And you got to think we'll be back better next year. I think we've got a good young core.
Do you think Martin Rennie will return as head coach?
I do. I think he's got the support of the entire organization, and I think he's trying to build something more long term. I don't know that Indy 11 is an organization that thinks they're competing for the title every single year. I think they're trying to build a team that's going to be near the top for quite a few years, and credit to them for that, because I think that might have been one of their mistakes in the early on in the first 3 years was they chased some players that probably didn't buy into the long-term vision of the team.
Interesting. Yeah. Personally, I do think Martin Rennie will be back. I'm not sure that he's earned that, but if you're not familiar with how the USL Championship operates, every time a player is signed or whatever, or extended, it always says, details of the contract will not be disclosed per club in league policy, right? So that's always the default. It's hard to be an Adam Schefter of this league, and having covered the team for several years, I definitely can confirm that it is hard to confirm even like some basic information that you're kind of scratching your head. I don't know why this is so hard to iron down, but so I did reach out to the club, and I was like, I went back to the original press release that announced that I went back and reread it, and Martin Rennie had just been extended. It said he will coach for 2020. It didn't say if he had been signed to a 2-year deal, no details of the extension. How things usually work at this level is most contracts are a 1-year thing, or often with an option for year 2. And I was curious to know if he had like an option for year 2, or for all I know, he was still under contract. So it was a complete non-issue that, yeah, of course he'll be back. But I couldn't even confirm whether or not he's under contract for next year automatically. I don't know if he has an option. I don't know if it was just a 1-year extension and he is out of contract as of the end of November. And then they'll have to decide whether to, to bring him back or whatnot. So I could not confirm, even in people that, sources that I'm like, I don't know how this person does even, like someone who I swore would have the info was just like, I don't even know what his contract situation is. So, but, and to be clear, I'm not reporting anything here, but this is just my feel. My gut instinct is that he will be back. It sounds like he's going to be given kind of a mulligan, just, for COVID, which is fair. I think it's fair to pretty much anyone in a professional sense. There's a million cliches you could throw out, trying times, blah, 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 new normal. But yeah, it is kind of unfair to judge a lot of people when they, everyone's world was kind of turned upside down in 2020. So for that reason, I think it's a fair assessment to bring him back. And the indications I get are that he will be back, but I don't know why that just can't be confirmed. But anyway, and as far as like me personally, I probably would not bring him back. I really like Martin Rennie, having covered him. He's a nice guy, great conversation, interviewed him many times. So obviously it's nothing personal. But I think, I don't know, his tactics took kind of a step back, I thought, in the middle of the season. So the biggest problem last year was goals, right? The defense was the best in the league in 2019, and the goals were hard to come by. Well, Rennie kind of switched his tactics, right, and went kind of with 3 true forwards to start the season. Often it was kind of Carlton playing underneath, so not necessarily like 3 true forwards, I guess, but and that kind of solved the problems. Indy was scoring goals in bunt. They came back and dropped, I think, 4 on Tim Howard in the season opener. Then COVID hit, and the thing is immediately after COVID, Indy looked like the best team in the league. Like, they had kept in the best shape, kept in the best form during the break. And they looked like one of the best teams in the league. And I remember I even wrote an article for Indy Star and pretty much saying that, I can't write in first person. I'm supposed to keep opinions out of it, but I basically said it's probably the Indy 11's best team. Or, I compared it to, there were only two other teams that really would have compared: the 2019 team and then the 2016 team, when Indy 11 made the NASL championship game. And I honestly thought that the 2020 group was the most talented group. But something happened mid-season, something very bizarre. And inexplicably, Andrew Carleton, who I thought, most chances were created kind of from individual moments of brilliance, from Tyler Pasher or Ayoze, weaves the ball and then finds Pasher or whatever. And one of the few people I thought who really could unlock a defense from the run of play, just collecting a random ball in the middle of the field, turning and making, there's only really one player that could really do that and make a dangerous, incisive pass in behind the defense from the run of play. And that was Andrew Carleton. He did that with regularity. And in fact, I went back and looked at some of my old tweets, and at least 2 times this season, I identified him at halftime as like an early nominee for man of the match. And then he just kind of inexplicably fell out of favor with Rennie. I tried to follow up on it, and to my knowledge, he did break his wrist. So he had a cast on his wrist, but that wasn't inhibiting him. He still played through that. So not counting that, he did not have any other injury. He didn't violate team rules. He didn't, there was no discipline thing. He just, I don't know, Rennie inexplicably just stopped playing Andrew Carleton. And I just don't get it. Go ahead.
I thought that was interesting as well. When Carleton came here on loan, I thought surely he would be one of the top 3 players in the league. He is unique. He's a very dynamic player, a player that we don't often see in American soccer. He's got his faults for sure, but at that level, you rarely see a player of his class. And I thought that he had games for Indy 11 where he was just walking through the teams, and he was just having his way with back lines. And him playing off of Pasher was brilliant. But I agree with you. Something happened where I mean, maybe it was something we're not seeing off the ball or defensively, because he always seemed committed. He seemed, I mean, he was put in a lot of effort when he was playing. And look, look, as a Fulham fan, I'll bring this in as just a part of reference. When you have players on loan, you're developing somebody else's player, and Indy 11 is developing Atlanta United's player. And as part of, I wonder if Indy 11 will bring in players on loan of that caliber anymore for that reason. But at the end of the day, you're playing to win the games. And I really felt like Carleton should have been a player who just should have been on the field in the pivotal moments going down the stretch, because we needed goals, and we needed goals that weren't from the predictable methods that we were playing with down the stretch.
Apologies to our listeners. We had a quick tech issue there. Our recording got cut off. So we are back. Apologies. And Justin, why don't you pick up right where you left off? We were in the middle of talking about Indy 11's tactics, and specifically Andrew Carleton kind of inexplicably falling out of favor, as far as the starting 11 at least. So Justin, where were you?
Yeah, I thought when we first got Carleton on loan, I was thrilled. I was excited to see him come from Atlanta United, a team that had a lot of success with attacking players, and had a lot of top players on the roster. So maybe that pushed him down a little bit, but this gave him a chance to get minutes on the field. And I thought right away he showed his quality and showed he was going to be one of the most dynamic players in the league. And like you alluded to earlier, it seemed to come off the rails a little bit later in the season, and he had the wrist injury, and you didn't know, people want to point the finger at one thing or the other as to why things like that happen, but maybe it was just several different factors adding up, on top of playing so many games back to back. You wonder why he wasn't on the field more at the end of the season. He did look to be one of the most dynamic players in the league, and we sort of ran out of ideas. We became predictable. We being Indy 11, it just seemed like the style of play of Indy 11 became predictable over time. We got figured out, and a player like Carlton would have had different tools in his toolbox than maybe some of the other midfielders had.
And I recall when the Indy 11 first hired Martin Rennie, I knew he had coached the Whitecaps and, North Carolina Railhawks and whatnot, but I didn't know too much about him, and nor did some of my fellow sock takers. So, in fact, I remember this vividly. We reached out to a really smart MLS personnel person, and I still remember vividly because they used the word shoehorn, but this person basically, so we asked, give us a scoop on Martin Rennie. We don't know too much about this guy, but you're an MLS expert, especially from that era. So school us. And he basically was like, his teams are well organized, but he'll shoehorn as many CDMs into his starting 11 as possible. That was almost verbatim quote, because I remember he used the word shoehorn CDMs. And so I am constantly reminded of that quote, because as I alluded to earlier, starting Carlton as kind of a quasi forward with two other forwards, that seemed to really unlock all of the problems of 2019. Goals were coming in bunches, wins were racking up. There was much more balance. The defense wasn't quite as sturdy. It was conceding some goals, but who cares if you're getting results, right? So as things started to fly off the rails, I don't know if Martin Rennie panicked or if maybe just the offense sputtered one game. But I guess if there was a direct replacement of Carlton, it was, I guess, Cameron Lindley, who I thought played pretty well. He's a good player. I like the kid. And he was worthy, talent level. He's worthy to be in consideration of starting. So it's not like I have a problem with him starting. But I don't know. He went back to the 3 CDMs in the middle of the season. Suddenly the team couldn't score. And then as the wheels fell off, then he kind of stuck with his guns. He stubbornly just kept playing that lineup. And if I have to pinpoint someone, okay, let's say you want to leave the 3 CDMs, okay? Still, if you have a talent like Andrew Carlton, no offense whatsoever to a couple of other Indy 11 forwards like Nick Moon, Jeremy Raffanello, but on no planet, should those guys be starting over Andrew Carlton? Maybe for a brief moment, but that was a thing. The whole end of the season, those guys were starting. One of those guys was starting over Carlton. Like I said, Lindley was because Nick Moon was getting quite a few starts back when Carlton was starting. So it wasn't exactly, a swap for swap, but I guess Lindley's kind of the one who etched himself, and he did play well. Lindley, he's a great passer. He had a bunch of assists for Memphis 901 last year, and you could tell he's a good passer too. And especially on set pieces, he serves in a very good ball. But it doesn't matter. It's not about Cameron Lindley. It's about just figuring out to get your best 11 on the pitch. And it's just so inexplicable that a guy with, U.S. Youth International experience, that somehow he's not deemed worthy enough. Especially, just admit you're wrong. Maybe you have that thought, hey, let's try not starting Carlton for a game or a couple of games, right? At least don't be stubborn enough and realize, hey, we're not scoring anymore. We're not getting chances, why don't we put Carlton back out there? And it just seemed I don't know, that shoehorn CDMs at all costs just always comes back to me. And that's exactly kind of what Martin Rennie did down the stretch.
And going back to what we were talking about earlier, Carlton it could be seen as he's a number 10. And a number 10 has a hard time finding space in American soccer. There's very few number 10s playing anymore. And especially at that level. I think he's dynamic enough, and he's athletic enough. He can play on the wing. He can play as a second forward, but he's at his best when he's playing in the hole, ball played to feet. He can play on the half turn and turn defenders and start creating space for his teammates. He gives you a lot of opportunities, and that excites us. But you got to wonder if Martin sees him as a liability in the organization and the structure of the team. And like your source said, that's very important to Martin. And so he wants to keep the middle of the field compact as possible. And Carlton maybe doesn't have the same energy coming back as he does going forward.
Yeah, and Martin Rennie, like you said, he has a track record of letting talented attacking players slip through the cracks, just like that. We've seen this same playbook, right? We have seen this with Thomas Enevoldsen. Uh, he was a complete non-factor. He wasn't. I mean, he was hardly in the picture at all. Underutilized. When he did play, he didn't look like that comfortable. And so mid-season, we get rid of it. He goes out west and starts scoring goals in bunches. Finishes off with, I think, a double-digit scoring campaign in 2019. Same thing. 2018 was Zach Steinberger. He wasn't in the picture. He got a couple starts, but he was not a regular starter. All those players who are kind of uh, a quasi number 10 or second striker that plays underneath. Those
Dylan
guys, those creative playmakers have always struggled in Martin Rennie's system because he wants to just control the ball. He wants his 3 CDMs to kind of pitter patter around the back. And then usually they'll unlock a defense with like a long change ball from Iose or, find Pasher and he'll work his magic. But and then also we saw it with Dane Kelly, 2019 Dane Kelly, who he is actually more of a true forward. But same story with him. He goes to Charlotte this year and he's in the Golden Boot race the whole year. And it just Rennie has a track record of playing too conservatively. It's too conservative of tactics, I'm trying to beat you 1-0. That's the Martin Rennie philosophy.
You got to give him credit for unlocking Tyler Pasher then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Tyler Pasher was a fullback as far as anyone know when we got him, and he turned him into one of the best forwards in the league. So yeah, Rennie's done plenty of good. And I think he kind of reminds me of like Klinsmann, not all in all, but just this one particular thing, how he projects as like a really good technical director, I think. But as far as like in-game coaching decisions and pre-match coaching decisions, they'll just have like inexplicable lapses. And one thing that kind of drives me crazy too is like, let's say 2019, right? One of my favorite stories I wrote last season, 2019, was a feature on Alion Diakate. And if you're listening, you don't know who that is, you probably have never heard that name unless you're a diehard Indy 11 fan. But great story. One of my favorite stories I've ever written. This guy came out of nowhere. He's from Senegal, showed up literally just at the open tryout. No one knew who he was. I don't think, he might not have even had an agent at the time. But sure enough, he impressed Rennie, made the team. Absolutely phenomenal story, great success story. That said, he made the team and didn't get a lot of minutes at first, but finally Rennie did slowly allow him to kind of get his feet wet and give him some minutes. And to be honest, in my opinion, he looked like completely out of his depth. I hate to say it, I love the guy, great story. And there was a period where Dane Kelly hit a rough patch, right? Classic striker, goes in a goal scoring drought, 4, 5, 6 games, can't score, whatever. And, maybe Dane Kelly probably deserved 1 game off, but I know Diakate ended up getting multiple starts. It wasn't a lot, but he got at least 2, maybe 3 starts right there when Dane Kelly was in a funk. And I don't believe in like that type of managing personally. I think you only give a guy like 1 game off. After that, you're just like getting in his head, like Dane Kelly, if you keep starting him up top, give him his minutes, he's going to score. That's proven. And that probably didn't help Kelly's confidence any that he sees Diakate starting over him for a couple games in a row. And even then, like, okay, if you're going to not start Kelly, start someone different. It was just like, I don't know, like, it was like Rennie got caught up in the story almost that, this guy came from obscurity, straight from Senegal, phenomenal story. But like, that doesn't get you wins. You know what I'm saying? You almost have to be kind of a ruthless jerk sometimes as a coach. And it's like, even though it's a great story, like I could tell the guy, like his first touch just wasn't there. He struggled with his finishing and he just looked like completely out of his depth a couple times when I saw him. And you just have Dane Kelly sitting there, the best way to get someone out of a slump is for them to score, for them to be on the pitch scoring. So I don't know. It's just head scratching decisions year after year. And also Ilya Illich, forgot to mention him. He's still on the team. So it's not like Rennie gave up on him, but he was a great player for Louisville, a key piece of their, championship team in 2018 before we got him. And he was kind of the same story as Enevoldsen last year. It's just we happened to keep him. And then again, he might have started a couple games, but he's basically a bench player that just makes occasional appearances. And it's just like, if you look at what some of these players did in the past, And then it's not like they're washed up because they go other places and continue to pick up where they left off. So it definitely has to do with Martin Rennie's system, in my opinion. And he's done plenty of good things. He's not a terrible coach by any means, because, you know, he almost made the playoffs, barely missed the playoffs this year, made them the 2 previous years. So like I said, it's just a boring brand of football, a conservative brand of football. It kind of wears thin when you just see so many talented guys just seemingly unable to score. And then when they are struggling, then they won't get the minutes needed to kind of get out of the slump. And even if guys continue to play, they still sometimes won't reach their full potential. Besides like Tyler Pasher, no other attacker has really consistently been on point for their entire Indy 11 tenure under Rennie. So anyway, sorry for the rant. Sorry for the long rambles. I'll let you get out of here, Justin. Thanks again for joining us. To our listeners that might be interested in helping out, whether it's Indiana futsal or Indiana soccer, whether it's donating or helping paint a court or helping with time, where can they go and how can they connect with you to get involved?
You can go to soccerindiana.org. That is the Indiana Soccer website. You'll see the futsal tab up at the top. But at that website, you can find what is the closest soccer club near you. You can get your referee license. You can get your coaching license like Kevin. We happen to live in one of the states, one of the few states in the country that provides free coaching education. That is a part of the mission of Indiana Soccer, is that all coaches have the right to free education and free licenses. And I think, everybody wants to know how they can help, how they can participate, how they can get involved. And I really think yes, we like to, connect people in building futsal courts and providing places to play that aren't the traditional spaces. But reach out to your local soccer club, ask them how you can help, whether that's coaching. We always need referees, whether that's helping hands on game day. A little bit of help goes a long way to provide these kids, and not just kids, and adults and people of all abilities. It gives them the opportunity to play. If you want to reach out to me, I'm Justin at soccerindiana.org. And I'm all ears. I'm open to any ideas or opportunities you have. And let's talk about bringing the game to your community.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Justin Becht, for joining us. I'm your host, Kevin Johnston. This was episode 64 of the Sock Takes Pod. Hopefully we won't go many, many months again without another episode. We'll give you some more content here soon. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. Until next time, take it easy.
Thanks, everybody.